In this chapter, Paths to Modernization, we will discuss some of the questions. So, here comes the question number 1. China and Japan, they have a long tradition of historiography. Evaluate. We'll talk about the history writing of China and Japan. So, here you can see in the China and the Japan, they have a long traditions of historical writing as the history writing. Okay, history writing, it was an important guide to the rulers. The past, here they provided the record. Okay, history writing, when we talk about the past, it provided the records by which they would be judged, and the rulers, okay, he established the official department. Okay, the rulers, he established the official department to maintain the records. So, and write the dynastic histories. Okay, so here comes a name, Sima Qian. Okay, you can see he is considered the greatest early or you can see greatest historian of early China. So when we talk about the historical writing of China and Japan, we will see it has a very long tradition of historical writing. Okay, even the rulers, what they do, they record these documents, and then they have made an official department. They have to maintain these records and they write the dynastic histories. So when we talk about Sima Qian, is considered the greatest historian of early China. In Japan, you can see the Chinese cultural influence led to the history of being given a similar importance. So even Japan also, it gives similar importance to what? To the historical writing. Similar importance to the historical writings. So, as far the historical writing is concerned, one of the major act by the Meiji government, okay, there was to established in 1869 a bureau to collect records and write as it were a Victor version of the Meiji restorations. So there was a great respect for the written words and literary ability. It was highly valued. This means that there was a wide range of written materials. Okay, and you will see scholarly writings, popular literatures and religious tracts, they are what? They are available. When we talk about printing and you can see publishing, okay, so here when we talk about the printing and the publishing, it become what? It become the pre-modern industries. And you can see the distributions of book in the 18th century. Distributions of book in the 18th century. ठीक है, most scholars have used this material in new and different way. As we read about the modern reformer in China, especially the Liang Qichao, and then we talk about Kume Kunitake. Okay, Kumi Kumitake, one of the pioneers of the modern history in Japan, as well as the, you can see the earlier writing by the European travelers. So here you can see these two where we get the information about the history of China, as well as you can see Japan, and then you will see here comes the European travelers. First we talk about the Marco Polo. Okay, Marco Polo, in China from 1274 to 1290. Then you will see the Jesuit priest. Jesuit priest here, Matthew Ricci and Louis Ferros. Okay, so in Japan, all whom left rich account of these countries. So here it's important thing that modern scholarship has built the work of Chinese intellectuals, such as you can see Liang Kachao or Kume Kunitake. Okay, they were the one of the pioneer of this modern history in Japan, as well as you can see the earlier writing by the European travelers such as the Italian Marco Polo, who came in China from 1274 to 1290, and then Jesus priest Matthew Ricci in China, and the Louis Ferrois in Japan. So Louis Ferrois in Japan. So all of whom they have left rich account of these countries. It has also benefited from the writing of Christian missionaries also. And now we talk about whom? The Christian missionaries. Okay, so these Christian missionaries in the 19th century, whose work provide the valuable materials for our understanding of these countries, okay, of about China and Japan. Then we talk about Joseph, okay, Needham. His monumental work on the history of science in China. So he worked on the history of science in, you can see, in China. And then you will find, okay, here comes George Sampson on Japanese history and culture. So we talk about whom? The Japanese history as well as culture. Come to the next question. What is the physical contrast between China and Japan? So when we talk about China, you know, it's a vast country. So China, it's a vast continental country, okay, that span many climatic zones, okay, either tropic or subtropic. So you will see the core is dominated by three major river system here. One, the Yellow River, then which we call Huangho, then comes Yangtze River, Changjiang, and the third longest river in the world, Yangtze River. Then comes the Pearl River. Okay, Pearl River, you can see the even Pearl River, and the large part of the country is a mountainous. So when we talk about Japan, okay, it's what? It's a string of islands. String of islands. You can see four islands, four major islands here. Largest behind you can see Honshu. Then second come Kyushu Island, Shikoku, and then the fourth comes this Hokkaido. So it comprises of four largest island, okay. And when we talk about Okinawan chain is the southernmost, about the same latitude as the Bahamas. So more than 50% of the land here is of island is mountainous, and Japan is situated in a very active earthquake zone. So now we talk about the ethnic group of Japan and China. So China, you can see major important ethnic groups are the Hans, and the major language here is Chinese, Puton Guha, and there are many other nationalities such as the Uyghur, Hui, Manchu, and Tibetans. Aside from the dialects such as Cantonese and Shanghainese. There are other minority language spoken as well. So when we talk about this Japan ethnic group, the population is largely Japanese, but there are a small Ainu minority. Okay, Ainu minority and the Koreans who were forcibly brought as labor, and when Korea was a Japanese colony. So you will see when we talk about the Japanese ethnic group, Ainu and Koreans were those who were forcibly brought by the Japanese when they were colonized. So here you will see that the regional diversity in Chinese food also. So when we talk about this Chinese food, so it also reflect diversity with at least 4 distinct types. Okay, so best known is the first you will see the southern or the Cantonese. Okay, Cantonese cuisine. As most overseas Chinese, they came from the Canton area, which include the dim sum. It literally means touch your heart. Okay, an assortment of pastries and then dumpling. And in the north you will see wheat is the staple food, and while in Sichuan you can see spice. This was brought by the spices was brought by the Buddhist monk. Okay, in the ancient period along the Silk routes and the chilies you can see by the Portuguese traders in the 15th century. They have created a fiery cuisine. And when we talk about the eastern China, you can see the rice and the wheat are eaten. Okay, the rice and the wheat are eaten. And when we talk about Japan, so you will see that it lack a traditional of the traditions of animal rearing. And when we talk about rice is a staple crop, and you can see fish, the major source of protein. So raw fish here, sashimi or you can see sushi has now become a widely popular dish around the world as it is considered very healthy. So here we saw the physical contrast between Japan and China, as well as we talk about the diversity. So now come the political system. Here comes a question that in Japan the political system it was feudal. Evaluate the statement. Okay. So when we talk about the emperor rule, so you will see that Japan, okay, from the emperor they ruled Japan from which place? From Kyoto. But by the 12th century, the imperial court they lost the power to shoguns. Okay. So who in theory they were ruled in the name of the emperor. So we will see from 1603 to 1867. Okay. Members of which family? Tokugawa. Member of Tokugawa family, they held the position of what? Shoguns. Okay, they held the position of shogun. And then you will see it under this shogun you can see the country it was divided into 250 domains. Okay, you will see the country was divided into 250 domains or the sectors under the rule of the lord that we call daimyo. So it called daimyo. And you will see the shogun they exercised the power over the dominal lord. Okay, they exercise the power over the daimyo or the dominal lords. So you will see that in the late 16th century, okay, three changes. It laid the pattern for future development. So what were the three changes? One was the peasantry. Here you will see peasantry was disarmed. Okay, and only the samurai they could hold what? They could hold the swords. Then comes, this ensured the peace and order, ending the frequent war of the previous centuries. Then the second is the daimyo. Okay, were ordered to live in the capital. So the daimyo, they will live in the capital. Then comes each of a last degree, you can see when the third, the land surveyor or the land surveys identified owners and taxpayers and graded land productivity to ensure a stable revenue base. So you can see now there was a survey of land, identified the owners and the taxpayer, and even they graded the land according to its productivity to ensure a stable revenue base. Okay, survey of land. So as the daimyo were ordered to live in the capital of the domain, and then you will see with they were got a last degree of autonomy. So now the daimyo capital, okay, it become larger. It become bigger, so that you can see by the mid 17th century, Japan not only had the most populated city in the world, Edo, but also two other cities. You can see one in Osaka and Kyoto, and at least half a dozen castle towns with population of over 50,000. So by contrast, you can see most European countries of the time, they had only one large city. So this led to the growth of commercial economy and created financial and credit system. Okay, and now you will see that a person, his merit became more valued than his status. So a merchant, you can see vibrant culture, it blossomed in the town where the fast growing class of a merchant, they patronized the theatre and the art. As people enjoyed reading, it became possible for gifted writers to earn a living solely by writing. In Edo, people could rent a book for the price of a bowl of noodles. So this shows how popular reading had become and gives a glimpse into the scale of printing.